With great medical care, you can guarantee your doctor will give you the best leeches to help get rid of that bad causing you to get sick, but because leeches were hard to come by and it was an actual occupation for someone to get leeches to sell to doctors, the profession in itself was actually getting pretty expensive as well. And so the artificial leech was created. During the Victorian period, scientific and medical research boomed as doctors experimented with all kinds of cures and treatments, as according to researchers of this era, using leeches for bloodletting also proved so popular it led to the shortage of the worms. And so this artificial leech was used to stimulate and simulate the similar effects of extracting said bad blood out. Which, to be honest, may work for some treatments. After all, bloodletting is still used today in the treatments of a few diseases including hemochromatosis and polycythemia. It's even practiced by specifically trained practitioners in the hospitals using techniques also known as therapeutic phlebotomy. I mean, if you were sick, would you use the real leech or an AI one? But that was the thing with professionals of their craft, is that they always wanted to make something more simple, like George Eugene Frederick Kastner, who wanted to do something that every person would enjoy, like when you go to church it would be so exciting if you saw an exploding organ. Yes, George wanted the organ to be so dramatic, he made and designed an organ which blew out fire out of its windpipes instead of just normal wind. I swear in The Simpsons they had an episode where some guy was playing this exact organ, or was it Family Guy? I don't know. But you know what would be funny? If by some comedic effect, imagine they were going to show this invention off, but they didn't tell anyone the pipes were going to blast fire, so they thought, you know what would be the best place to show off our cool new invention? During a funeral. So they would blast his organ at a very important part of the sermon just to scare everybody. Again, I have no idea why he wanted to have the pipes blast fire, but I think he was just bored. Speaking of exploding objects, of course fire was a scary notion in the Victorian era, as it was very prevalent and very difficult to reduce. They didn't really have much to prevent these great fires that has affected large populations and portions of towns and cities. Especially if your exploding organ exploded, you might want to have a backup plan. So the exploding organ resulted in the creation of the exploding hand grenade fire extinguisher, as it was born. Originally the thought was, hey, if we can't get to all the areas all at once, why don't we just toss a new hand grenade fire extinguisher, as this fire extinguisher was designed to be thrown like a hand grenade, and it was patented in 1883. However, the glass bottle contained poisonous toxic liquids which could enter the body, damaging the lungs, kidneys, and liver. So you can toss it, but just stay very far away from it. In the end though, this invention turned out to be a flop, and although the concept was nice, it didn't do much. But let's say it did get too hot, and no, the new hand grenade fire extinguisher couldn't do the job, but you know what might be? Your hat. It can be very hot in the summer, and even if you want to look fashionable, it can be tough when your outfit is drenched in sweat. So in order to avail from getting sweaty, try the new air conditioner top hat. This wonderful and underachieved invention is the bona fide ventilated top hat, as it advertised by John Fuller and Company in 1849. The bona fide ventilating hat would have allowed men to wearing hats without overheating, as it has a vent at the top of the hat and basically be able to circulate air into the man's head while he's still wearing said hat. I said hat so many times you can take a shot. I mean, don't do that. I mean, it was also moderate trend like every other trend that we see, but it didn't last as trends die out hard. And I feel like if you were bald, you might want to try this invention out, as it might be better because you don't have hair. But speaking of hair, there might be some who might find the electric hairbrush pretty fascinating, as this fashionable hairbrush is actually powered by magnets despite its advertisements of being an electric hairbrush. Because what's common in the Victorian era is false advertising or clickbaits. When you go to your local salesman or even to an eccentric bloke on the street, he might harass you and your family during the evening to promote his electric hairbrush. After all, brushing one's hair is a tedious task, especially if it's very long. Actually, this was powered by magnets, as they were marketed at, but Victorians who feared of going bald really was the main people that they were looking at. But of course that wasn't enough for the superficial markets of the Victorian era, so they had to sprinkle some white lies or some incentives. They also claimed these electric hairbrushes could cure constipation, malaria, lameness, rheumatism, and blood diseases and paralysis. I think the reason why so many inventions led to other medical illnesses is because the Victorian era they had so many and were not always able to fight the root cause of their ailments. But don't worry, after all, things like the electric corset would help you if you're feeling sick. When you think about a corset, you might think it was utilized as a fashion or shapewear type of fabric, but apparently this was also used to help women with a weak back, chills, and of course, rheumatism. Created and patented by a man named Cornelius Bennett Harness, he said that every married man should buy an electric corset for his wife, if he loves her. In the ad it says, in appearance of these corsets do not differ from those usually worn, being made of the same material and parentheses best quality. In the latest style and most approved shapes, they are in fact the best thing for ladies young or old, especially those who have a weak back, chills, or rheumatism, and even hysteria. It also helps with internal complaints, loss of appetite, and nervous dyspepsia, dementia, kidney disorders, and so much more. Man, a corset can do it all? Either way, he got sued because the electric corset was actually magnetic rather than electric. All it had was a magnetized steel busk of the plates at the front that attached together to fasten the corset. The articles and the sellings of this corset ended up being a flop anyway, as it resulted to a lot of customers demanding their money back. Even at one point they got arrested because of the scams, and the jury couldn't make a formal decision about Harness. The courts ordered that the company would be wound up, and almost immediately Harness had to try to resurrect himself as a medical electric institute, and was allowed to do so on the condition it was under an actual qualified medic. Didn't end up working out though, as his reputation as a shady man was already out in the open.
Number 10. Greek fire. You know what's scary? Fire. You know what's even scarier than that? Someone who can shoot streams of fire at you. While some people love the smell of napalm in the morning, they are usually the people doing the firing. And it wasn't just shirtless Americans who did the firing, no. Somehow, the ancient Greeks also used a proto-napalm that would be used against other ships in naval warfare. The substance would apparently cling to flesh and was impossible to extinguish with water. What puzzles us is that the recipe for Greek fire was never told to anyone. It was a secret on the same level as the Krabby Patty secret formula. People have experimented with different ingredients that the Byzantine Empire had access to. The Mythbusters, my favorite scientists, used naphtha, which is made from a light crude oil, mixed with pine resin, and they burned down a ship in a few seconds. I'm sure at the time, people thought that those who used Greek fire were wielding the power of a god or something. Number 9. Damascus steel. While off on the Crusades, a lot of Europeans came into contact with things they'd never seen before. Spices, for example. Please cut it with the bland food, guys. Please. Another thing they saw were warriors who wielded blades that could slice through floating handkerchiefs but also bend to ridiculous degrees without breaking. These blades were made from what was called Damascus steel. But for some reason, we actually have no idea what these blades were actually made of, or what the process for making it could even be. Some people think it could have been made by mixing iron with plant matter, which could have given the kind of flexibility I'll never have. But we don't know what plant matter, and we don't even know for sure that's how it was done. Best guess is that it was made of crucible steel, which, can I just say, sounds really cool. But that's just a theory. Wait, that's the wrong channel. Number 8. The Voynich manuscript. This may be a little bit insensitive of me, but the drawings in the Voynich manuscript kind of look like the same things I used to doodle in my notebooks when I stopped paying attention in class. I definitely never wrote like that though. The Voynich manuscript is named after Wilfrid Voynich, who was a Polish collector and bookseller in 1912, when he acquired the manuscript. It's from around the 15th century and is written in this really cool looking code with strange drawings. The font actually kind of reminds me of the font from Lord of the Rings. Does anyone else see that, or am I weird? A lot of the pictures drawn in the book seem to be plants. But then you get the random page that has a string of what looks like pregnant women and you're back to square one. I don't know, but I'm still going with somebody's encrypted notebook with fun doodles for when they're bored. Number 7. Ulfbert swords. How do you make a sword that your society did not have the technology for? That is an excellent question, and it is the question that Viking Ulfbert swords pose to historians. The problem with Ulfbert swords is that the technology required for making them did not appear until about 800 years later. Now the thing that kind of bothers me with that assumption is we are assuming that it didn't appear until 800 years later because we haven't found evidence to prove otherwise, except for the swords themselves. In Viking society, a lot of stuff was made with wood and other degradable things, which makes it really hard to know too much about the ancient peoples. What's really interesting is how a Viking sword bearing an Arabic inscription was found. Perhaps these swords were made with Damascus steel, the recipe for which was given to the Vikings through trade, maybe? We need more evidence to know for sure. Number 6. Baghdad battery. Do you know how a battery works? Allow me to explain. I don't really know. What I do know is that it involves chemistry. Google tells me the chemical reactions in a battery involve the flow of electrons from one material to another through an external circuit. I don't know. We often think of batteries as a moderately modern invention, and for the most part that's true. But then there's the Baghdad battery. The Baghdad battery, or batteries because there were a bunch of them, were discovered outside modern-day Baghdad in Iraq in 1936. And it's basically a clay pot with a copper cylinder inside of it. Inside the copper cylinder was an iron rod, held in place with asphalt. Now, if you take an electrolyte liquid like even grape juice or something, and put it in the pots now become batteries, generating about 2 volts of electricity. The crazy thing about this is that they were found in a Paleolithic village, which is like the Stone Age. We have absolutely no idea what the electricity was used for. Probably because it's fun to administer minor electrical shocks to yourself, right?
Clear Craze was a nightmarish 90s product fad that brought up number 5, Crystal Pepsi. This soft drink was made by PepsiCo and initially released in Canada and the United States from 1992 to 1994. As a result of the 1980s to 90s clear craze, as I mentioned, this craze started because the idea of a clear product was a pure product. As we know, this is 100% not true, but Crystal Pepsi was one of the many clear and colorless products released by manufacturers such as Soapsoft, Miller Brewing Company, Palmolive, and more. In Crystal Pepsi's first year, it captured 1 full percentage point of US soft drink sales, or approximately 474 million, the equivalent to 889 million in 2021. By late 1993, the manufacturer discontinued the beverage. In 2013, a video of Kevin Strahl drinking a vintage 90s bottle of Crystal Pepsi went viral. This video alone sparked tens of thousands of petition signatures to bring the drink back. Even billboards were erected to demand for it. This interest from this campaign led to an official response to Strahl by PepsiCo on June 8th of 2015, commenting on the YouTuber and his fans' commitment and enthusiasm with the teaser of the drink's return. And so in mid-2016, Crystal Pepsi was released across the United States and Canada, promoted with a retro-style website and marketing video. The funny thing is, it tastes like normal Pepsi. You may not remember the item, but your ankles will. Number 4, the Skip It. Whew, my shins hurt just thinking about it. During its initial release in the 1980s, the Skip It toy became a commercial success through its advertisements on daytime TV such as Nickelodeon and Boomerang, as well as other children's programming. It was based off of the toy of the exact same concept, the Lemon Twist from the 1960s. A Skip It is a weighted plastic ball that ties around the ankle. A stretch of cord in between your ankle and the ball is skipped over as you swing the weighted ball around 360 in a circle. Oh yeah, those suckers could whip back at any second and give you a bruise that even a Razor scooter could be envious of giving. Sometimes they were super fancy, making noise, having cool designs, or flashing lights, things of that nature, for the cool kids of 4th grade. Time magazine included it in their 100 greatest toys ever, and it's actually still available for purchase today, but considerably less common and less popular. The equivalent of psychedelic for a preteen was Lisa Frank items. Number 3. Girls growing up in the 90s had access to what may be history's most vibrant and eclectic eras of fashion and baubles. Baby Fat, the Delia's catalog, Wet Seal low-rise jeans, and of course, Lisa Frank. Their endless products included everything from stickers and 3-ring binders to jewelry and clothing. All featured the iconic brand signature aesthetic of cute cuddly animals in bright colors and patterns amidst black color blocking. Lisa Frank herself was only 24 when she incorporated her name into a franchise, and it's in the same year that she received its first $1 million order from Spencer's Gifts, aka she was a smash success from day one. Lisa Frank's popularity took a dip with the rise of digital era. The company receded into smaller collaborations and was mostly underground, but strongly resurged in the 2010s. Since there's been brand collabs with Crocs, Urban Outfitters, BlendJet, Morph Makeup, and even Pillsbury sugar cookies. If you've managed to hold on to some of your Lisa Frank items from childhood, you'd be surprised to know that some of them have gone up in value and are worth a pretty penny now. Number 2 is a trip to orbit and the bathroom, because this can't have been good for your stomach. This is for my Canadians. The 90s was a creative era for many things, especially beverages. Companies explored unforeseen parameters of flavor and aesthetics, and so we see the Orbit soda not soda beverage thing. It was a Canadian beverage and it was short-lived, both coming out and being discontinued in the same year of 1997. It's a clear drink, clear craze things, that's chock full of sugar and had bright colored gelatin balls suspended and floating mysteriously. It was fruit flavored, but I'll be honest, these are the last flavors I expected to read when I was researching this product. Blackcurrant berry, blueberry, melon, strawberry, pineapple, banana, cherry, coconut, raspberry, citrus, and vanilla orange. That is intense. No wonder these drinks were short-lived because of their overwhelming flavor combinations and weird floating orbs. Lava lamps are fun to look at, but no one wants to drink one. But if you do, hit eBay. You can still find unsealed Orbit's drinks there, running you an average of $50 a bottle. And number 1 is the Windows Start Maze Screen screensaver. Ah yes, the back rooms. Maybe this screensaver is why so many of us find a fascination with that concept. Anyways, if you had a desktop computer in or around the time of 1995 and 6, you're likely familiar with this endless maze screensaver. While the graphics may be painful to look at now, they were top-notch visual at the time, like a 4D roller coaster. The default setting for the maze is a textured with brick walls and a wood floor and an asbestos tile ceiling. Users can customize these textures, swapping them out for animated psychedelic patterns in later versions, or maybe create their own custom textures. The walls are lined with art, some random plants, and statues. The maze is randomly generated each time, with the player navigating it in first person, spawning in front of a floating start button. After starting, it automatically traverses using the right hand rule, which will guarantee the maze will eventually be solved because all randomly generated mazes are simply connected. This bizarre maze was perfect to zone out to for hours, or be the basis of creepypastas and spooky stories. I'm sure many 90s kids watching have their own memories of this creepy yet neat screensaver. 10 will be all about how one magic stone has a whole lot of uses. It's the Viking Sunstone. This stone was said to accurately pinpoint the position of the sun even through a cloudy, stormy, or twilight sky. To quote an explanation, when you're looking through the sunstone, you are not looking for colors but for shadows. If you draw a dot on the top of the crystal and look through it from the bottom, then 2 dots will appear. If you hold the crystal up to the sky and rotate the crystal until the 2 dots have the exact same intensity or darkness, at that angle, the upward facing surface indicates the direction of the sun. The oldest sunstone that could have been used for navigation was found amongst a wreckage of a warship called the Alderney, which sank between England and France in 1592. Archaeologists made the assumption that this crystal was used for navigation because it was found about a meter away from another navigation tool. So in other words, speculations, because it could have been a paperweight for all we know. But it was in the Raoul's Pater, which is written in the 12th century, that's used to support the navigation theory. A story from King Olaf Haraldsson II, set in 1030 CE, tells how he was visited by a rich and wise farmer. Said farmer tells the king he mastered the skill where he can tell the time of day and night even when the sky is hidden by clouds, without a sunstone. And so, to quote, the king made the people look out and they could nowhere see a clear sky. He then asked Sigurðr, the farmer, to tell where the sun was at that time. He gave clear assertion. Then the king made them fetch a solar stone and held it up and saw where the light radiated from the stone, and thus directly verified Sigurðr's prediction. Guess 2 things were proven true in that text: a farmer has magic powers, and Vikings use sunstones. And while I'm still on the Vikings, may as well bring up number 9, another inexplicable invention of theirs, the Uberfeld swords. Ah, Scandinavian words. I feel like my tongue is just gonna jump out of my mouth and run away trying to say them sometimes. You ever been to IKEA and just read that stuff? Anyways, what makes these swords so inexplicable? We aren't sure how they're made. Listen to this. We'll be learning about Damascus steel in the next point, but it's believed the Scans may have borrowed this technique or even materials from the Damascus steel process in order to make their legendary swords. To quote, archaeologists were shocked when finding these Viking blades because the technology needed to produce such pure metal wouldn't be invented for another 800 years. What reaffirms archaeologists' belief that the steel pattern was not just mimicked but actually shared between the Scans and the Middle East was a 9th century Viking grave that was found and excavated in 2014. Inscribed on the warrior's sword was 4/2 Allah, written in Islam. This could be a massive link between the 2 worlds that confirms the sharing of knowledge, or at least a steel for steel trade. And as stated, Damascus steel is next on our countdown, coming in at number 8. Some of y'all may have heard of this one by now, especially if you're a regular viewer on our channel. If so, lots of love, and if not, join the fam by subscribing to the Hive. But anyways, what is Damascus steel? Well, it's a very special type of metal that was being produced out of raw material, wood steel, which was harvested in Asia. It was first used around 300 BCE, but the knowledge seems to have been inexplicably lost around the mid-18th century. The secret of making the Middle East Damascus steel has only re-emerged under modern-day scanning of electron microscopes. Turns out nanotechnology was heavily involved in Damascus steel production, as the materials were added to the steel's production to create chemical reactions at a quantum level, as explained by the archaeology expert K. Chris Hurst. Alongside Peter Pulfer, it stated that the metal developed a microstructure called carbide nanotubes, extremely hard tubes of carbon that are expressed on the surface and create the blade's hardness, Hurst explained. Materials added during the production of Damascus steel include cassia bark, milkweed, vanadium, chromium, manganese, cobalt, nickel, and some rare element traces which are presumably coming from mines in India. This may be why the Damascus steel recipe was lost. However, as Hearst wrote, what happened in the mid-18th century was that the chemical makeup of the raw material altered, and the minute quantities of one or more minerals disappeared, perhaps because a particular load was exhausted somewhere in the world. Next up is a bit of an oddball. It's the Oxford Bell batteries, number 7, and unlike most entries on this list, scientists could probably figure out how the Oxford Bell batteries worked literally tomorrow if they tried. But why aren't they? Well, see, in order to do that experiment, they'd need to end another experiment, which is somehow inexplicably kept going for, over 180 plus years on accident. See, this bell has been ringing since 1840 when it was built by the London firm Watkins & Hill. They created 2 dry pile batteries to power the bell's swing. 2 batteries that should have died within weeks. Yet somehow these primitive batteries are still going, leading experts to realize their internal composition must be unique to have kept going on so strongly. Though scientists are desperate to figure out said composition, the bell is one of the oldest ongoing experiments in the world, and to see what made it continue for so long means ending it prematurely, which is just too great of a cost. So I guess we're waiting for the battery to die, if it ever does. We've hit the mid-video point, so I'm going to talk about 2 points to you that the everyday person has definitely heard of. But what they haven't heard of is their history. So let's start with number 6, the enema. That's right, as talked about in the recent video, Top 10 Dark Secrets of the Maya Civilization, enemas are quite literally as old as time itself. What is an enema? For my sweet summer children that have somehow not been exposed to the literal down under of the medical world, an enema is a fluid injection in the back door for the purposes of clearing a bowel. However, cultures in pre-Columbian times and quite a few others did use it for ingesting substances to get a quicker effect. The earliest medical text in existence, Egyptian Eber's Papyrus of 1550 BCE, mentions the enema, which they believed was invented by the god Thoth. The Olmecs, who predated even the Mayans, used enemas for rituals as well as for disease, as did the Mayans, as documented during the colonial period, e.g. in the Florentine Codex. Heck, in Parisian society, they were doing enemas as many as 3 a day. Louis XIV was said to have taken over 2,000 in his lifetime. Enemas were known in ancient Sumeria, Babylonia, India, Greece, and China. The indigenous of North America, even though far removed, independently discovered them as well. In fact, there's hardly a region in the world where people did not discover or adopt the enema. And as a result, we can't actually say who invented it first and who shared the information with who. It seems as a whole society collectively agreed we should put some stuff back there and see what comes out.
Number 5. Transistors. The invention of the transistor in 1947, we don't talk about it enough. This was a major breakthrough in the field of electronics. The transistor is a semiconductor device that can amplify and switch electronic signals, and this of course paved the way for the development of modern electronics, including computers, televisions, radios, this thing that I'm talking to you on, all of that good stuff. The invention of the transistor was made by a team of scientists at Bell Laboratories, led by William Shockley. William Shockley, he's like, oh, trust me, I have to do this profession. The first transistor was made using germanium, and it was much smaller and much more efficient than the vacuum tubes that were used at the time. Yeah, believe it or not, this was a step in the right direction. This was the future. I'm looking up research about transistors while using a computer. What a weird era we're in right now. It was a weird time. Number 4, the Parthian Empire battery. The Parthian battery is an ancient artifact discovered in modern day Iraq. This battery dates back to the 1st century BCE. Yeah, year 1, uno, just 1. Happy New Year. It's been one of them. The battery itself is a clay jar containing a copper cylinder that surrounds a big iron rod. Looks quite unsafe, if I'm being honest. I don't know, if I saw that on the subway, I'd probably not get on. A little sketchy. The jar also contains an asphalt stopper and an electrolyte solution, and it's believed to have been made of vinegar or wine, so that was their power back then. Although the purpose of the battery is not entirely clear, it's speculated that it may have been used for electroplating, or, check this out, or for medical purposes. Yeah, medical purposes. Imagine being brought back to life thousands of years ago, and there's a guy holding this, waiting in front of you. That's jarring. You're like, did I die? Am I back? What is that? What are you holding? The Parthian Empire battery is proof that we didn't need aliens back then to do stuff, right? Humans were more advanced than we think. Specifically humans from ancient civilizations. They somehow figured this out. They had knowledge of electricity and electrochemistry. in the year 1 AD. That's crazy. This invention challenges the commonly held belief that modern science and technology are recent developments. It's like, no, they had some shit back then for sure. Number 3, vaccines. Plagues aren't new. Random diseases that can sweep an entire country. We've seen this play out many times in history. The Black Death killed 75 to 200 million people in the 14th century. The Spanish flu in 1918, it killed 1/3 of the world's population, 50 million lives. The cholera pandemic began in 1817, and in 2010, there was another outbreak in Haiti. Couldn't get worse. Vaccines are a little important. Yeah, they go back to the 17th century when English physician Edward Jenner developed a method to protect against smallpox. Now, this was performed by injecting people with cowpox, which was a less severe disease. The practice of vaccination gradually spread throughout Europe, and by the 19th century, thankfully, vaccines were being developed for a range of diseases, including polio, measles, and tetanus. Those 3 things you really don't want at any point in your life. Vaccines have played a crucial role in preventing infectious diseases and have saved countless lives. However, there's also been a controversy surrounding their use, particularly in recent years with the rise of anti-vaccine movements. Yeah, a lot of people with Sharpies and time today. You didn't have that back in the dark ages. Bristol board wasn't a thing back then, you know? Number 2, ancient telescope. Yes, let's see some stuff. Let's see the past. The Nimrod lens. This is a 3,000-year-old rock crystal lens that was discovered, again, in modern-day Iraq. It was discovered in the mid-1800s. Just an ancient relic. Just an ancient telescope, fresh out of Zelda. There we go. Today we have the James Webb Space Telescope, but 3,000 years ago, they were more advanced than we thought. The lens is believed to have been made by a Syrian craftsman sometime around 750 BC, and it's the oldest known example of a magnifying lens. Up until then, everybody was squinting a lot, kind of like how I do with the prompter sometimes. You'll see, I'm like, ooh. The lens is quite small in size. It's about 3 centimeters in diameter, not much, and its focal length was only 12 centimeters. Again, it's no James Webb, but back then, thousands of years ago, it was something. Now, the exact purpose of the Nimrod lens is still up for debate, but it's thought to have been used for decorative or ceremonial purposes, or possibly as a magnifying glass for studying small objects. The Nimrod lens is the first example of ancient optical technology. So small. He's like, yes. The moon. Number 1, the printing press. Look, I'm no fan of homework, okay? But I get it. It's important. You gotta do it. The printing press, this is a revolutionary invention, and it was invented during the medieval period, and it allowed for the mass production of books and or pamphlets. Yeah, pamphlets were huge back in medieval times. They loved folding. Invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century, the printing press could now reproduce text more quickly, and it was pretty cheap considering what came before. You had to hire a guy just to rewrite everything. That's gonna take ages, and it did. Took quite a few fortnights. The printing press had quite the impact on society. It enabled wider access to knowledge, the spread of ideas, and it contributed to the growth of literacy, which I guess I could use a little bit of today. That's great. The printing press played a key role in the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation, and it may or may not have helped lay the foundation for the modern world. And I think it's probably the most important thing. I think words and ideas being spread, that's probably the most important thing. Don't you think so? Hit that thumbs up if you agree. Top 10, boom, history.
Number 10, the National Razor. What's a revolution without a little blood being spilt? Wouldn't really be a revolution, would it? France was having a hard time in the 1700s, so they needed a brand new way to get rid of pesky monarchs and anyone who isn't warming up to the revolutionary ideals. And what better way to keep people warm by cleaving their heads from their body? A man named Joseph Ignaz Guillotine suggested that there was a better method for unaliving those who needed to be unalived. A common misconception is that he invented the guillotine, but rather suggested its implementation, where his name would become synonymous with such a terrible device. Basically, you got a wood frame with a hole for your noggin and a large angled blade. Blade drops down from frame and removes the head of state from the governing body, which isn't just a clever joke, as that's what happened to the last king and queen of France. By the time of its invention and the end of its use all the way up into the 1970s, yes, that's right, it was used up until the 70s, thousands of people met their doom to the National Razor. Number 9, party favors in the sky. When you think of air travel today, you think of lots of space for you and your fellow passengers, meals that are flavorful and affordable. Air travel in 2021 is a stress-free, very organized way to travel. But in the 1700s, these luxuries of the sky were non-existent, as there was no air travel. Any international travel was done by ship, which took months at a time and was not a pleasurable experience, opposite to what was described above. Two French brothers wanted to change this, or rather just get off the ground. The two French brothers, Montgolfier, developed and flew the first unmanned hot air balloon on September 19, 1783. This was shortly followed up with a manned flight by Jean-François Pilote de Rosier. This was a very strange invention at the time, as this was really the beginning of humans and flight. Number 8. Puckle needs his gat. Ever since black powder first made it to Europe and Europeans figured out you could make big gun that go boom, people have been trying to come up with better and faster ways to make gun go boom. In the 1700s, the biggest issue with muskets and cannons at the time was reloading, or getting multiple shots off. Loading black powder weapons isn't easy. I'd say ask a pirate, but you can't. Those kind of pirates are all gone now. So to fix the issue of the day, a man named James Puckle invented the very cleverly named Puckle gun. Basically, he just added more chambers of shot rotating around one barrel. Although his idea for the time was genius, in practice it wasn't very effective, as flintlock and black powder are really the main issue. Clumsy, lots of smoke, and does not want to work in less than fair weather conditions. Number 7. Cotton Eye Joe. Dear YouTube gods, I am sorry that history is full of not so cool things, but here at Bumblebee, I'm the queen bee, and I'm here to give the buzz to my sweet honeybees. So in the name of good morals, monetization, and not getting smited, I'm gonna talk about your least favorite S word. Back in the 1700s, America was chillin'. They just beat Britain in a war, which alone could be its own video. They were starting to build their own country, particularly in the southern colonies, using forced unpaid labor that you can't leave. Oh, and your boss can do heinous things to you because he owns you. Their economy was agricultural based and stayed that way for a long time. Tobacco being the number one crop at first, cotton was still grown but wasn't as popular due to the processing of cotton being a very labor intensive and difficult process. This was until Eli Whitney's cotton gin, invented in 1794. The cotton gin was a machine that quickly removed seeds and processed cotton, making cotton a very valuable crop since, you know, the people harvesting the cotton are YouTube's least favorite S word. It's a brutal unpaid workforce. Now that it was profitable, cotton boomed and the South became very wealthy. While not exactly the main reason, the South getting rich off Whitney's design and did somewhat create a divide between the southern states and the northern states, eventually leading to the Civil War. Also, apparently plantation owners didn't pay Eli for his machine and he went broke. Just trashy behavior all around, man, come on. Number 6. Yes, I'm a Russian submarine commander. I actually couldn't believe this one myself, but the submarine was invented in the 1700s. Having designs and plans started in the 1500s, the first real use of a submersible vessel wasn't until 1775, named the Turtle, an acorn-shaped vessel with a crew of just 1. To me, it's just hard to think that in the same century we were beginning to master flight and sea travel. I also can't stop thinking that if there was a water ride that existed, it would be pretty cool if you went underwater in like a pod, like a submarine kind of thing. Just an idea for the mouse and the corporation. Of course, it wouldn't be years until after the Turtle that the submarine would see effective use. Or have a Scottish man play a Russian submarine commander in a really good movie. Russian submarine commander. Number 5. I'm coming out of this hole, partner. We enjoy many luxuries in the 21st century. Warm houses, everyday appliances, and the freedom to shout profanities at strangers on the internet you slightly disagree with, but you give them the business anyway because it's been a bad week and you deserve it. But probably what we should all be thankful for is modern medicine. Back in the 1800s, it just wasn't where it is today. A great example of that is safety coffins. A truly grim situation. A medical doctor has declared you dead. Now you are being buried alive. Have no fear, friends, because you had enough money for a safety coffin. The coffin contained a device or means of various designs, which was to alert the living of your mistaken burial and hopeful resurrection. The very rational fear of being buried alive most likely was spun from fiction and news at the time, with the occasional case happening here and there. However, I'm of the opinion it should be a never ever kind of thing. Yeah, no thanks. Number 4. Your bad hair day has just been terminated. Oh, to live in a time of industrial revolution where machines go and go. I'm sure that all this heavy industry won't enable bad practices of corporations and usher in the destruction of our environment. Pfft, no sir! This is the age of machines, and if machines can help with one thing, it most certainly can aid in another. May I introduce you the rotary hairbrush? Why brush your own hair when an overcomplicated machine can do it for you? At the time, it kinda made sense. Machines felt like they were the way of the future. They were kind of right, but at this rate everything in the home would have intricate pulleys or a steam engine attached. Steampunk anyone? Number 3. Full of air. The Industrial Revolution changed the world, we can't deny that. That can also be said for the steam trains. But what about pneumatic powertrains? Back in the 1800s, a man named Alfred Eli Beach came up with such a design. Prior testing had proven useful enough to build a larger demonstration in New York. So he built a tunnel to test his air-powered train. It only ran a short distance, but the train held 22 people and was controlled by a roots blower nicknamed the Western Tornado. That was also my nickname in high school. Sadly, the project didn't receive much support from the government at the time, and other methods for trains eventually took over. Unfortunate, because it sounds like Alfred Eli Beach was very dedicated to the project, as he put up a very large sum of money to the project. The tunnel that housed the short train line was completed in 58 days. While he did have bigger plans for his train, it kind of just became an amusement for people. It was shortly shut down thereafter. But 58 days, that's pretty quick. I'd like to see that happen in a major city now. No way it's happening. Number 2. Get on my mongoose, bro. Looking at the Motor Scout, you can see the beginnings of what could be a 4-wheeler. Personally, I think it looks like a mongoose from Halo, but Mom thinks I play too many games. Designed by F.R. Sims in the late 1890s, it was never really meant for off-road terrain, instead to support infantry on smooth roads. Sims, understanding the annoyance of trying to ride your motorized quad cycle while someone is firing at you, placed a Maxim machine gun on the quad to return fire. Which is strange, because usually these things require a team of soldiers to operate. He also added an iron shield for a little extra protection. It is too bad the next major conflict would have a lack of usable roads and more trenches than anything else. While it never did see combat, it was somewhat useful, and would later inspire Sims to design the first armored car. Number 1. Bro, trust me. Everyone has a favorite article of clothing. For sports fans out there, it could be a lucky jersey, but back in the 1800s there was an article of clothing no British soldier could be without. The cholera belt. What does a cholera belt do exactly? Well, it helps to prevent cholera. I've got good sources, bro, trust me. The running not-so-scientific theory at the time was that any abdominal issues and sickness was caused by a chilly belly. So simply make your tummy warm and voila, cholera has been prevented. British soldiers in India were often given the belts unaware of the biohazard that was an epidemic. The belts were just flannel that basically wrapped around you. It's a good thing we're not superstitious today and would never buy into such ridiculousness. Hey man, did my order of healing crystals come in? I'm getting some bad voodoo vibes at home lately, man. I totally need to cleanse that space, bro. Number 10. Game Boy shoes. I'm not the most fashionable guy on the planet. I'm just a simple guy who likes simple things, so you can understand my shock, my horror, and my confusion when I saw the Game Boy shoes. Yes, that's right. Remember the Game Boy? Picking a starter Pokemon for the first time. That was a really serious choice. The very same portable console that changed your childhood could now sit snug as a bug in your platform shoe. I have several issues with this. 1, can someone send me a working Game Boy? I miss those games, man. Come on, those are really cool. I want one. Number 2, it just looks ugly. No shot you roll up to somebody's house with those bad boys and they go, yeah, you're cool, dude. You look great. You don't. Number 3, maybe this is fine to wear in sunny California, but in Canada, the Game Boy would spend most of its time in snow. Or puddles. I couldn't do that to such a beautiful piece of gaming history. I would never forgive myself. Number 9. Are you winning, son? Is something your dad and every dad has said when checking on their kid playing games on a Sunday afternoon. Naturally, not knowing what a video game is or what a Pikachu does is just part of being a dad. However, next time dad decides to go on one of his fishing trips, you should surprise him with the Game Boy Fish Finder. Yeah, I know, another Game Boy gadget, but I had to. Every dad says they caught the big one, and they're not talking about your mom. But now dad can see them coming. Imagine spending hours in the summer sun on a lake with your dad, and the only thing that was distracting you from his developing drinking issue is now being used to find fish. But sometimes Nintendo likes to do weird stuff. Remember when the Wii came out? It was kind of weird. Loved it though. But a fish finder? This is only something a 90s fever dream could come up with. I'm just not sure about that one. Number 8. Floppy disks. Going with a lot of tech today, but stuff like this defined the later half of the century. Why are floppy disks on this list? Well, because it was arguably just as important as the PCs that revolutionized computers. And it's silly to think that how storage that small was so useful. Storage on floppy disks varied from different models over the years, but for an example, one model held 1.44 megabytes. Today in 2022, we are arguably in the beginning of the terabyte era. Now, try putting more than 5 AAA games on your Xbox, am I right? Gigabytes just aren't enough anymore. Now, if you crunch some numbers, a 1 terabyte flash drive has over 1 million mg, which, if we do even more math, is just under 700,000 floppy disks to our modern equivalent. The math is a little rough, but my point is clear. We've come a long way. Well, turns out that they were still somewhat being used up until 2019. I know, that's what I said. The US and whatever mysterious forces are in charge of nuclear weapons were still using them up until 2019. I feel like that's the wrong thing to put in charge of nuclear weapons. A floppy disk for nukes? That just feels like a bad idea. Number 7. Dial P for Palpatine. I just wanted to give you guys some more Palpatine. I think you guys really like it. But something that I don't know if our viewers experienced, but let us know if you did. This is kind of interesting actually, but the creation of 911. Honestly, what did people do before that? Pick up the phone and like, operator, help! Help, my house is on fire! Okay, sir, hold on, we'll just connect you. Okay, thanks. This is the fire department. Help, help, my house is on fire! Well, thanks to the totally non-corrupt and fairly priced AT&T, a nationwide number was decided to be the best for dialing emergencies and not waiting for an operator or any other option like screaming for help. A senator made the first 911 call on February 16th, 1968, which sounds like a long time ago, and it is, but it also kinda isn't. I don't know, that's kinda weird. Number 6, I am the destroyer of worlds. I mean, this is kind of a big one, literally. It's the reason why there hasn't been a World War III since, or why there will never be a World War IV, because there would just be nothing left. What am I talking about, of course? Jello mold foods. Nah, I'm just kidding, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about nuclear weapons with the capabilities to wipe out an entire city with the flip of a button. Part of the super secret Manhattan Project, the goal was to make a weapon so destructive that whoever was unfortunate enough to catch a case of the super weapon would surrender immediately. Japan would unfortunately be on the receiving side of this, and shortly thereafter surrendered World War II. Imagine though, the power to level an entire city in just a few seconds. It's something unthinkable just a few years before. Some might even call it an act of biblical proportions. And you wouldn't be that far off either. Number 5. Hello there. Channeling our inner General Grievous, our number 5 spot belongs to the Monowheel. Originally designed in the 19th century, it wasn't until the 20th century they slapped a motor on one of these bad boys and did their best escape attempt from Utapau. Sorry, I'm a Star Wars guy. It just looks like the vehicle from the 3rd movie, I can't help myself. In reality, the monocycle is a single-wheeled motorized vehicle where the driver either sits inside the wheel housing or right beside it. Today these vehicles are still around but really only used for entertainment purposes, as the design does have a few issues. One wheel gives balance issues, there's a visibility issue since, well, you know, you're usually sitting inside the wheel, and an issue called gerbling, which basically means if the driver brakes too hard, the inner ring will overcome its own gravity and the driver will do a full loop, similar to how a gerbil spins around on its wheel. Seeing that would make Monday morning traffic a lot more amusing though, I gotta say. Number 4. Deep breath, my equine friend. World War I was the war to end all wars, except for the 10 major wars that came after it. Noted for being the bloodiest and most destructive conflict at the time, it gave humanity a bunch of cool and exciting inventions, so long as they were not being used on you. One of the worst things to come out of the First World War was the extensive use of trench warfare and chemical weapons, or more specifically chlorine gas. Trench warfare was brutal, not only in its barbaric over-the-top charges into machine gun fire, but also in its living. Trenches had terrible living conditions, and were difficult to take from the enemy. Crossing no man's land was no joke. So, to eliminate the pesky enemies entrenched in their trenches, the very cruel chlorine gas was used, causing nausea, violent coughing, chest pain, and corneal burns, just about everything you'd find on the back of normal medication, right? Gas masks helped when they were available, but unfortunately they were not the only living creatures on the battlefield. This is where our invention comes in. The very depressing invention of the horse gas mask. The idea is the same. Horses need protection too, and since World War I was still a war powered by horses, it was more common than you might think, and a lot of our equine friends perished alongside us. Number 3. Wilson! Some of you may have been cool enough back in 1975 to own a pet rock. Some of you may have not. Looking back, it doesn't really make any sense. Sure, everyone needs something to keep them company. Tom Hanks would have never gotten off the island he was stranded on if it wasn't for Wilson. Imagine a world without Tom Hanks. I, for one, would not want to live in such a world. All jokes aside, the pet rock was a genius marketing campaign, very similar to the fidget spinner of recent years. It's proof that if you can get a fad trade rolling, you can sell anything. Now who wants some of my bathwater? Number 2, Chef's Kiss. Okay, it's 1958. Times are good. Cars have cool fins on them. Elvis is on the radio, and most of my post-traumatic stress disorder has cleared up since the war was over. It's all great. Ah, yes, life is good. I can't wait to enjoy some modern cuisine. Well, let's see what's on the menu. I'll have to start with the frozen cheese salad. I'll have ham and banana hollandaise. And for dessert, I'll have the lime jello tuna pie. If that doesn't sound appetizing, I don't know what does. For some reason, halfway through the century, people just lost their taste buds. They were coming up with all kinds of disgusting foods. A lot of them are in low form for some strange reason. I think the grossest item that you can come across is a little invention called hongar. Sounds like somebody from Skyrim, but nay good sir. Hongar is a mixture of honey and apple cider vinegar. It was thought to provide great health benefits. The only thing that would give me is a spot in front of the toilet refunding my breakfast. Ugh. Number 1, Krümellauf. Germany was having a really hard time in World War II. The United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, France, and Russia too were all coming to give the mustache man a piece of their mind. Heavily outnumbered, it was time for a miracle. Time to see what top German scientists had up their sleeve. We have a rifle that can shoot around the corners. Isn't it wunderbar? Yeah, this thing is real. A curved barrel called a Krümellauf, used for shooting around tight spaces like corners and out of tank hatches. During the waning years of the war, Germany was coming up with all kinds of crazy inventions to turn the tide. But a rifle that can shoot around corners probably isn't the answer. As mentioned above, the world was coming and they needed a lot more than a fancy pants rifle to stop the Allies. History tells us that this invention did not work as Mustache Man is no more. Number 10, Nintendo 64 Disk Drive. For youths everywhere in the 90s, nothing really compared to the Nintendo 64. Sure, Sega was trying and Sony's brand new PlayStation was making waves in the video game market, and it had great games too, but pound for pound the Nintendo 64 had it all. Amazing single player games and multiplayer that literally paved the way forward for other games of the future. I mean, just listen to these games. Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Super Smash Bros., Star Wars Rogue Squadron, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Kazooie, Mario Kart 64, Mario Party, WWF No Mercy. That one's one of my favorites, brother. I mean, that is just a few of the games to mention. It truly was an amazing console, and for the first try at 3D, very, very impressive. Well, how could it be on this list then if it was so great, Chetty, you're probably saying to yourself? Well, in case you didn't know, in the late 90s, well, it was changing times and CD-ROMs were all the rage. This is why in secret Nintendo was developing an attachment for the Nintendo 64 that would play disc games. However, after a troubled development and skeptical sales, it was only released in Japan, like a lot of good things. This was not one of them, where it sold poorly as only 9 games were ever made for it, making one of the most beloved consoles of all time. Well, it left it with an ugly blemish on its legacy. Number 9, AquaNote. It sounds strange, but a lot of good ideas come from the shower. Maybe it's the isolation, maybe it's the smell of Irish Spring, or a hot shower on a cold winter's day. Oh, it's one of my favorites. But for some strange reason, a lot of people's best ideas come to you in the shower. Who would have thought? For me, it's jokes. As a comedian, I'm always thinking about stuff like that, and I swear I've come up with some real gems in the shower. It's too bad though that when I get out of the shower, I forget. Too bad when I get out of the shower, I forgot. Oh man. Well, clearly I need the AquaNote, a waterproof notepad so I can write down my thoughts and thinks without my Blue's Clues notepad getting waterlogged. Oh, sounds great, right? Okay, sure, I guess it's helpful, but if I was using someone's shower and they had a notepad in their shower, well, it would be strange. Hey, sorry whoever uses this next. Shave my back hair and clog the drain. Sorry, XOXO. It's just a weird invention. It's just not good. Number 8, new Coca-Cola. To me, there's nothing better than sitting in the hot summer sun, slathered in sunscreen, in my Muskoka chair because I'm a Canadian, and beside me is an ice cold Coke. I love beer, but there's just something about it I love. Cheers, Coca-Cola fans. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Now, I like the original recipe the most. However, cherry and vanilla are great. I'm just a vanilla guy. During the 1980s, Coke made a bold decision and released a new Coke formula. It was a bold decade, so, had to make moves. In 1985, the new formula made it past testers, but when it reached the public, there was literal public outcry to bring back the old stuff. The good stuff. Only a few short months later, shelves are restocked with classic Coke, bringing back the old formula, which may have also been a genius marketing technique. Number 7. Red dye number 2. My mom was not the best cook on planet Earth. That's just the truth. However, hold on, everyone jumps all over me. Her baking was out of this world. Cookies, banana bread, cupcakes, Yorkshire puddings. I had to stay quiet during that one. She said they'd never rise if I didn't be quiet. You name it, Mama Chetty, she made it great. She used all kinds of ingredients, except for anything with red dye number 2. She always said it wasn't good for me, partially because I was, a little tanky kid and hyper, but also because during the late 70s she was told that a certain red dye number 2 was extremely harmful. Some scientists believed it was carcinogenic. The red dye was in a lot of stuff, plus who can blame them with a mouth-watering name like red dye number 2? I want some just thinking about it. M&Ms were so concerned with the rumor that they removed red from their palette of colors for a whole decade. Maybe Mom was onto something. Number 6. Sega Genesis add-ons. While the Nintendo 64 disk drive was ridiculous, the Sega Genesis add-ons were 100% ludicrous and way worse in my opinion. Mainly with 2 key add-ons, the Sega CD, which saw more use than the Nintendo 64 disk drive, with such classics like Night Trap, which I'm not even sure what to classify that game as. It's a sleepover, and you got there's cameras, there's burglar. It's weird, I don't know. But besides that cult classic, there really isn't anything on there. There was also the 32X add-on that works with all your 16-bit Sega games, but also can enhance and has a select library of updated games for the 32X or 32-bit era. Sega was trying to keep the Genesis alive, and with those sales, you can't blame them. Sonic sells, baby. However, without a total support of these add-ons, lack of games, and being sold separately, it just wasn't as popular as, well, the regular Genesis or as Sega would hope it to be. Also, not to mention, each add-on had to be separately powered, so that's 3 AC adapters you gotta plug in just to play on the couch with friends. Too much, dude. Too much. Number 5, the spaghetti fork.
Make sure you put my special spaghetti fork on the table. I need to eat my pasta and gabagool.
Italians and lovers of the best cuisine on earth, in my opinion, I love Italian cuisine, get ready to cringe. The twirling spaghetti fork is a battery operated fork that twirls when you push a button, so you no longer suffer the burden of twirling your own spaghetti. Listen, I'm a big dude, I'm lazy, I love staying in after a long week of work and playing video games, probably my favorite thing to do. Yeah, sometimes I order in because I don't feel like getting up, but not twirling mom's spaghetti? Come on, twirling the spaghetti, I argue that's the best part. No dinner with no should require AA batteries in my opinion, I'm just saying.
You bring a fork, why you bring us a fork?
Number 4, hydrogen blimps. It really must have been something to witness humans gaining flight. Something so previously impossible was now not only possible, but something that you had to pay money for, which is how you know it was very successful. Large jumbo jets full of croc-wearing tours headed to Slav attractions was still a thing of the future. We're not there yet. This is still the early 1900s. We'll get there. So how do we get people to places in large numbers and still manage to be opulent? Said a bunch of people in the early 1900s. Airships, said Germany, who took the blimp game to the next level. However, a lot of these blimps made a cut in their design, if you will. To help save on money, the airships were filled with the much more cheaper hydrogen, which in large quantities is extremely volatile. The Hindenburg is a great example. Well, we could fill it with a safe fuel, but it's really expensive, but we could fill it with the fuel that could destroy the whole thing, and that's like 10 times cheaper. Well, I'll fill it with that then, why would you not? Number 3, flying car. Maybe it's because we love the idea of breaking new ground, setting precedents, or we really just want to live with the Jetsons. It was a cool cartoon. The Mizar flying car was designed by a group of engineers in the early 1970s, using the very famous Ford Pinto, like previously mentioned, because, well, it sucks on the ground, so it's gotta be good in the sky, right? Right, that makes sense. Well, no. Besides the mechanical issues, it would be a hard sell as, well, you know, the average American doesn't have flying experience, or not to mention a runway in their backyard. Plus, we have trouble with drones today. Imagine if it was raining Ford Pintos. Yikes. Mom, there's another Ford Pinto in the living room! It wouldn't go very well, would it? No. Number 2, the pet rock. This one's so stupid. It's just a rock. Legit, that's all it is. A fad about buying a rock and naming it. Oftentimes including those little googly eyes to make you believe it's alive, because yeah, okay. It's a ridiculous invention, it has no use. However, what it actually is a lesson in great marketing. Something weird enough that can be marketed quite easily, sold at an affordable price, and something that is already familiar with the people everywhere. So it actually makes sense, even if it is a bad invention. And number 1, this one, it's just so true, the Segway. About 15 years ago, these bad boys were all the rage. Basically, it's an electric scooter on 2 wheels with a handle to lean forward and lean back, or perhaps reverse. While there was some success in malls and airports, there wasn't that many in public. The main reason? Well, it's no different than a scooter or a bike, really, and well, it kind of feels like an attempt to reinvent the wheel when we don't need it. Also, in 2022, how many people do you know that have a Segway? Seriously. And if someone pulled up in a Segway to your hangout, it'd be kind of weird, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would be weird.